I can understand why the Hymn Book Commission so badly wanted to include John Lennon's Imagine in our 1993 hymnal Singing the Living Tradition. It's a simple yet moving song that in many ways describes what we mean when we talk about the beloved community. It lends itself immediately to any consideration of our fifth principle, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all, which my late colleague, the Reverend David Hicks Macpherson, always held up as the most important part of his universalist vision of the future. Moreover, Imagine focuses on what we can do in this life, which includes sharing the abundance of the world in which we all live. Given that, in spite of the fact that the Hymn Book Commission couldn't get the permission they needed to be able to include it in their collection, it's one of the more popular non-hymnal songs sung in UU services. Still, there is that one line in the beautiful future that Lennon asks us to imagine, and no religion too. Now, it's quite understandable that he'd include that in the verse rejecting nationalism and ideologies to kill or die for. But that does mean that when Imagine is sung in services, including at the UUFP, there's always that what the moment of cognitive dissonance when we find ourselves singing in church about imagining no religion. This morning, I want to talk about three things. First, what it is that would make us want to imagine no religion. Second, what we might say in defense of religion. And third, why singing in church about imagining no religion might not actually be so much of a paradox after all. So what is it that would make us want to imagine no religion? The answer, quite simply, is religion's bad reputation, and a reputation that's been growing worse, too. I found myself in a strange little conversation with a friend recently when I shared my enthusiasm for the Reverend Dr. William Barber's homily at the National Prayer Service by writing, "Take me to church, Dr. Barber." Well, my friend let me know that the phrase has another meaning that has little to do with inspiring preaching in a religious service. However, it did make me think of a song called "Take Me to Church" by the Irish musician Andrew Hosier Byrne. Actually, it was his breakout hit, but it's not a song about going to a nice church service. Rather, Hosier uses religion as a metaphor for a toxic relationship. And "Take Me to Church" became a protest song against hypocrisy and homophobia in the Catholic Church in Ireland. If you've never heard it, consider that a couple of the lines are, "I'll worship like a dog at the shrine of your lies. I'll tell you my sins and you can sharpen your knife." If that's religion, then what sensible person would want any part of it? We know that a steadily growing number of people feel that way about religion, especially amongst the younger generations who are more likely to embrace multiculturalism than their elders, particularly so when it comes to sexual orientation and gender identity. That's why the number of religiously unaffiliated people, the nones, Nones, so called because when it comes to belonging to a religion, they check off none of the above. That's why the number of nones is growing, not because they've stopped believing in God or have become agnostic, but because they don't want to be a part of a religion, any religion, when all that means to them is hypocrisy, lies, bigotry, hatefulness, and dehumanization. What's more, religion's reputation has only become worse in recent years, thanks to some prominent evangelicals getting into bed with the last administration, all so that they can have their precious anti-choice judges appointed to federal benches and the Supreme Court. Never mind the sheer hypocrisy of fawning over someone who habitually lies, cheats, and steals, someone who doesn't know what 2 Corinthians actually is, someone who had peaceful protesters tear gas so that he could pose with an upside down Bible, someone who was so criminally negligent as to allow 400,000 Americans to die. It's not hard to be against religion when it seems to be so tainted that any reasonable person wouldn't want anything to do with it. Given that, what might we say in defense of religion? Well, for starters, we might point out that religion isn't a monolith. There isn't actually a single thing called religion. Rather, there are religions, a plural, a very big plural, in fact. And even when referring to what we think of as a religion, Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, those aren't actually singular either. There are Christianities, Judaisms, and almost as many forms of Hinduism as there are Hindus. In fact, painting everyone, from Roman Catholics to Eastern Orthodox, Mormons to Southern Baptists, Methodists to Muslims, Jews to Jehovah's Witnesses, Hindus, Sikhs, Buddhists, and Unitarian Universalists with the same broad brush is a form of prejudice as unhelpful as any other. Consider another defense of religion, and in this case, in relation to imagination too. Some years ago, the acclaimed science fiction and fantasy author Ursula K. Le Guin wrote a review of a book by novelist Salman Rushdie in which she praised his criticisms of religion. In particular, Le Guin celebrated Rushdie's imagination, noting that imagination functions actively in both science and story, whereas religion, which prescribes and proscribes, in her words, is irreconcilable with both of them. And since it demands belief, must shun their common ground, imagination. Well, such a declaration brought a response from Bill Whitson, a minister of the Church of Scotland, who explained that religion does not necessarily demand belief, certainly not unquestioning belief, nor does it invariably prescribe and proscribe. At its best, religion operates precisely through the exercise of imagination. Now, Whitson did allow that some religion does function in the way Le Guin describes, proscribing and prescribing, demanding belief and shunning imagination. In contrast to, say, the Jesus actually described in the Bible, Whitson noted that many of his followers do teach doctrines, add dogmas, promulgate creeds and moral codes, and seem determined to act as constitutional lawyers. The only way to fix that, Whitson concluded, is to use imagination. There's an adage when it comes to online communication that you should never read the comments. In this case, Whitson did read the comments in response to his article, but that turned out to be okay because even when people disagreed with him, everyone was polite, perhaps because this was all in a British newspaper. I mention the comments because one person declared that demanding belief is precisely what all religions do by definition, to which Whitson responded, a lot of religion does demand belief, but definitely not all. It is not a definition of religion that it demands belief in dogma. It is a description of what a lot of religion does, especially religion known to people in, quote, the West. There is, yes, a common idea in the West that religion is all about what you believe, and that to belong to a religion, it's necessary to believe certain things, as might be spelled out in an official creed. This is a narrow view of religion, though, and it doesn't apply when it comes to Eastern religions or indigenous religions. For that matter, it doesn't apply to Unitarian Universalism, which has long rejected creeds and instead actively embraces freedom of belief. In another comment response to address the idea that religion is all about God, Whitson wrote, the role of imagination is not simply to imagine God. It is to imagine a world and the way the world might work and the way our lives might be if we follow an alternative way. And that brings us back to John Lennon's song, which is arguably showing us such an alternative way. So here's why singing in church about imagining no religion might not actually be so much of a paradox after all. Imagine for a moment that you are on a journey and you come to a river. You need to get to the other side, but there's no bridge and the river's too deep to wade through and too wide to swim across. Thankfully, you find a boat. And once you figure out how to use it, you do the work necessary to get across the river. Okay, so now you're on the other side of the river and you're ready to continue on your journey. This might seem like a question with an obvious answer, but do you try to take the boat with you? Well, no. The reason you used the boat was to get to the other side of the river. The boat was a means to that end, and you don't need the boat anymore now that you're across. In fact, becoming attached to the boat and trying to drag it with you, or worse, just sitting in it and never even bothering to cross the river, that would be a problem. In Mahayana Buddhism, the boat is a metaphor for religion itself. Mahayana means great vehicle. And the point is that once you've used the boat to get across the river, once you've used the vehicle of religion to get you where you need to go, you don't need it anymore. Oh, and to really twist your noodle, as one of my seminary professors used to say, once you've crossed the river and you look back, you see that there wasn't even a river there. It was all an illusion. So the boat wasn't so much about crossing the river as helping you to realize what is actually real and what isn't. Either way, the point is that you don't need the boat anymore. Or, since the boat is a metaphor for religion, once religion has got you to where you need to be, you don't need it anymore, even in the case of Unitarian Universalism. Think about it. If we all truly lived the seven principles, there would be no need to affirm and promote them, because we'd already be beyond that. If we had already found spiritual wholeness, if we were already holding ourselves accountable in word and deed to dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions, if we had already built our diverse, multicultural, beloved community, then we wouldn't need the proposed eighth principle. Imagine a future in which Unitarian Universalism is no longer needed, a future in which the inherent worth and dignity of each person is truly respected, a future in which the interdependent web of all existence is visible and tangible. I don't think this is what John Lennon meant when he asked us to imagine no religion. He clearly saw religion as a cause of suffering, which, to be fair, it has been, either because it has itself caused killing and dying, or because it has allied itself with nationalism and other forms of bigotry. But to my mind, that suffering is a consequence of getting attached to religion for its own sake, rather than recognizing it as a means to another end, a result of seeing religion itself as the goal, and so trying to protect it from the winds of change and the power of imagination. Ultimately, in Lennon's vision of the future, of the beloved community realized, there's simply no need of religion because we're already there. Just to be clear, yes, I am saying that the ultimate goal of Unitarian Universalism is to change the world such that there is no need for Unitarian Universalism. That may strike you as a really strange thing for a UU minister to say, but it's no stranger than singing in church about imagining no religion. Until then, of course, our world very much needs Unitarian Universalism, and we Unitarian Universalists have a lot of work to do to share and make real the good news of the beloved community. Until then, the work we do at the UUFP to grow in wonder connect in love, engage in service, and inspire generosity is very much needed. And imagination has an important role to play in that. So go on. Imagine all the people living for today, living life in peace and sharing all the world. Let's imagine our way into that future.